Lebanon has not always been known, as it is today, as a troubled and dismantled country. Its name was not always associated with terrorism and violence, as it is now. It was, until a few years ago, a beautiful country, hospitable and friendly to all comers. It was a haven of stability and civilized life in a troubled Middle East, a place where it was nice to live. Lebanon is a small country of 10,452 kilometers and 3,300,000 inhabitants, located on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. It is a mountainous country with a 200-kilometer maritime facade in a surrounding of flat lands and deserts. Lebanon can be described as a land of mountains and sea. Its mountainous nature has developed throughout the ages. Among its inhabitants, a spirit of freedom and independence. Faring on the sea has inclined them to be open-minded, to accept coexistence and interaction with others on terms of equality and respect of freedom for all. These mountains of Lebanon form a barrier separating the land of the north from that of the south, while the highland of the Bekaa Valley and the coastal plain offer a direct passage between those lands, easier than desert passes and flatlands in the surrounding areas. Since ancient times, Lebanon's strategic location at the intersection of Asia, Africa, and Europe made it a natural bridge between those continents, a meeting place for their peoples, and a center of interaction for their civilizations. Its location also exposed it to the greed of conquerors and ambitious leaders dreaming of gathering all the lands of the Middle East under their rule. The natural defense facilities provided by the Rocky Mountains of Lebanon, the warm hospitality and open-mindedness of its people, attracted to it throughout the ages people persecuted for racial, religious, or political reasons from neighboring countries. It offered them an asylum against tyranny and a land where they could be free amidst the darkness of oppression covering the whole of the Middle East. Freedom of thought, of belief, and of expression have always been paramount values for the people of Lebanon. Oppressed religious minorities found it a ready shelter. They learned to live together in mutual respect and acceptance. In spite of their differences, they lived in the same villages, worked the same land, shared each other's festivities, and fought side by side, Christians, Druze, Sunnis, and Shias, all united, whenever a common danger threatened their freedom. As a land of minorities, Lebanon was also a land of ideas and an active center for their exchange and interaction. No school of thought was banned, no culture refused, no religion or sect or church rejected. Despite the deep attachment of Lebanese people to their ancestral traditions and patrimony, all were given an equal chance to expose their views and concepts and to gain followers. Many did. Lebanon soon became a center of exchange of people and ideas, of commerce and trade. It was the natural link between Eastern and Western civilizations. It was the only country in the Middle East with no official state religion, where Christians and Muslims lived in harmony as equal with one another. As a unique melting pot, it created a factor of stability in a constantly perturbed Middle East. Like all other people, Lebanese did not agree on everything. They had their differences, but they developed a very efficient way of compromise, known as the Lebanese way of settling problems peacefully. Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, was also that of the Middle East, a booming and yet pleasant town, a strange mixture of hectic activity and immemorial dreams, a modern center of business where the greed for wealth was tempered by a centuries-old civilization. In addition to a very high concentration of local and foreign banks, Lebanon was proud of its 4 major universities: Lebanese, French, American, Arab, its reputed high schools, its world-famous art festivals, Baalbek, Jebel, Cedars, Tyre, and the many cultural centers to which its youth and elders alike flocked: British, French, Spanish, Italian, German. It was a nice place to live. Of this haven of peace, nothing is left today. 13 years of war have torn the whole of Lebanon apart. Burnt-up ruins and shell and bullet-riddled walls are all that remain of the once proud trade centers and business towers. Factories have been destroyed and fields deserted. More than 150,000 people were killed, 50,000 crippled, hundreds of thousands forced to flee their homes and native towns and villages. The state has been dismantled, the administration paralyzed, the country fragmented. Communities that once lived in harmony together stand up against each other. Rival militias formed in the names of communities have each seized a piece of land at the expense of the state and of the unity of the nation. And they fight each other in order to expand or protect their respective fiefdoms, practically prohibited to other communities. Today, foreign armies and terrorist organizations occupy and control more than 75% of the country. Lebanon, once a factor of stability in the Middle East, has been turned into a major center for international terror and an essential base for its worldwide operations. Airplane hijackings, assassinations of diplomats, foreign residents and visitors taken as hostages, booby-trapped cars exploding in crowded streets, indiscriminate shelling of residential areas have now become part of the daily life of a once friendly and peace-loving population. Fear and hatred overshadow today the whole of a country, known until recently for the ready and warm hospitality it offered to all. Many friends of Lebanon have wondered how all this could happen in such a short while. Some thought that Lebanese had all gone amok at one time and decided to destroy overnight that paradise on earth it took them generations to build. Others came to the conclusion that there are probably some congenital vice in the structure of a country harboring so many different religious communities, among which hatred and conflict had to be the rule, whereas understanding and peace could be only the exception. A few, better informed, knew but dared not say for political or economic considerations that foreign interferences were behind the troubles in Lebanon. They knew but dared not say that Syrians, Palestinians, and Iranians took advantage of the democratic regime and absolute freedom prevailing in Lebanon to further their ambitions and promote their interests. Their motivations were not the same, but all had one objective in common: the destruction of Lebanon as an independent and sovereign state, and through its destruction, the eradication of freedom and free men from the map of the Middle East. Each in his own way, each for its own motives, shared through insidious propaganda in spreading suspicion among the various Lebanese communities, instilling fear among the Christians, and nurturing frustration among the Muslims. Later on, sometimes using organized terror and sometimes direct military action, they succeeded in igniting war and making the Lebanese fight each other out of fear and for no purposes of their own. They provided weapons to one community, ammunition and money to another, training facilities here and there, and switched alliances overnight whenever it suited their interests. More than 12 years have elapsed since the beginning of what many in the West and throughout the world see as a civil war, while it is in fact a covert warfare against Lebanon. 12 years of bloodshedding, of rampaging and destruction, of terror, tears, and despair. Lebanon, once a land of peace and happiness, is today a land of sorrow, with no end in sight to its trial. Yet amid all this desolation, there remains in the deep south of this scorched land a place where peace among the various communities is being preserved, where fear of the unknown and hatred is refused. It is the last stronghold of freedom in Lebanon, and its last hope for resurrection and revival. Here people feel secure, living and working together, as they always did, in mutual acceptance and respect, in spite of their differences. Sharing similar values, they fight side by side to protect their freedom and their land. It's a haven of peace in desolated Lebanon. Behind this stability and peace is a man and a dream come true. General Lahad, commander of the South Lebanese Army, is a Lebanese patriot and career officer who has pledged his life to serving his country. As a major general of the Lebanese Army, he resigned in 1983 when the army was dismantled and fragmented into rival sectarian units as a result of politicians' pressures and foreign interference. He felt the army could no longer be depended upon to defend the country against dangers that threatened its very existence, dangers from within as well as from without. Meanwhile, in the Deep South, a handful of patriots were fighting to preserve their land and freedom against Palestinian hegemony, Syrian annexation, and Iranian fundamentalism. They were the brave but loosely organized, lacking experience and efficiency. General Lahad decided to take their command, turning them into a true military force, now known as the South Lebanon Army, or SLA, capable of facing all events. General Lahad's objectives, as he himself defines them, are clearly set. They can be summed up as follows: to maintain Lebanon's sovereignty over the area he controls, and to protect it against all attacks, and keep it free from terror organizations and armed militias. To preserve the traditional harmony and cooperation between communities, which he sees as the cornerstone of Lebanon's unity and independence. To protect minorities whenever and wherever threatened, Christians, Druze, Shias, and Muslims alike. To promote the process of peace and goodwill in the whole of Lebanon, as well as between Lebanon and all of its neighbors, as peace is essential for the survival and stability of Lebanon. And to free Lebanon from all foreign forces now occupying its territory. As for the internal problems among Lebanese, which have provided a pretext and a convenient cover for the war waged on Lebanon, General Lahad believes that they can be settled amongst Lebanese once foreign interferences are stopped. He also believes that new political structures, better adapted to the reality of Lebanon, can be worked out with the agreement of all concerned. He thinks that the centralistic nature of the government in Lebanon and the way in which it is traditionally distributed between Christians and Muslims, as compared with the absolute Muslim hegemony prevailing in neighboring Arab countries, are at the core of inter-Lebanese conflicts. This distribution of power, which was agreed upon by all Lebanese in 1943, within the context of what is known as the National Pact, gave the Christians the presidency of the Republic, along with some other key positions. It reassured them as to their future by providing them with what they considered as indispensable guarantees to preserve them from being absorbed later on by the Arab-Muslim world surrounding them. Muslims accepted the arrangement at that time, in view of the fact that Christians represented then a clear-cut majority in Lebanon. The position is different today. Muslims, due to a higher rate of demographic progression, now equal Christians in numbers. They demand a bigger share of power, whereas Christians are reluctant to give up the positions originally reserved to them, which they see as the basic guarantees of their survival and of the safeguard of their specific identity against the many hazards threatening them. This conflict between the two groups could probably have been solved in the traditional Lebanese way, were it not for the interference of foreign parties, which, using it as a cover for their ambitions, ignited the devastating war which now jeopardizes the very existence of Lebanon without benefiting any of its communities. At this point, General Lahad says that the land is more important than the regime or the type of government, and that preserving the integrity and unity of the land takes precedence over any other consideration. He also sees that the de facto dismemberment of Lebanon and the mutual feelings of suspicion and enmity between the feuding parties have reached today such a point that they cannot be ignored anymore, but are to be taken into consideration in any serious endeavor to reunite the parts of now dismantled Lebanon. He believes that a solution to the Lebanese problem could be provided within the frame of a federal structure based on the redrawing of the internal map of Lebanon and the reorganization of its territory into provinces or districts socially homogeneous and economically viable, which would take into account the de facto pluralistic regrouping of the population resulting from the war. In the suggested federation, local affairs would be the sole responsibility of provincial authorities, having a political status and a fair deal of autonomy. The unity of the land and of the country would be ensured within the frame of a federation in which authority would be shared fairly, in fact as well as in the texts, between the federal capital and the provinces, as well as between the various communities. This structure should be flexible enough to fit the current situation and likely to adapt to future developments whenever need be. 4 years have elapsed now since the SLA was formed under the command of General Lahad. It has been through the test of fire many, many times and proved its efficiency and determination every time. With more than 110 kilometers of front lines, the SLA has to face daily attacks on its positions and check daily terrorist attempts to infiltrate its lines. Casualties are sometimes heavy, but they do not weaken the morale and determination of SLA soldiers. All of them, Christians, Druze, Shias, and Sunnis, know that this is the price they have to pay for the freedom of their land and the security of their families. All of them are ready to pay it. Inside the area, people live in peace and move freely from village to village and from town to town. Fear and suspicion have not spoiled relations between communities, as is the case in most other parts of Lebanon. Christians, Druze, Shias, and Sunnis meet without discrimination in daily life. They work in the same fields and in the same offices. They share each other's festivities and fight side by side to protect their common freedom and traditional way of life. Due to the dismantling of the state, social and community problems such as schooling, medical care, water supplies, roads, and electric power are taken care of by village and town committees with the backing and help of the SLA. Communications with other parts of Lebanon are ensured by land and sea, with no restrictions imposed on the freedom of movement in whatever direction, because the Deep South is a part of Lebanon and intends to remain so. People living and fighting there under difficult conditions have pledged themselves to free their country from international terror and foreign occupation, to restore peace in Lebanon, so that it may again be a natural bridge between East and West, and a factor of stability and peace for the whole of the Middle East. They know they have a long way to go, but they're determined to keep going, regardless of pain and sacrifices. They depend primarily on themselves, but they know they can also depend on the support of free and peace-loving people throughout the world. In ruined and desolated Lebanon, in the midst of tears and sorrow, a wind of hope is blowing from the south. carries a dream of peace, understanding, and freedom for all. You can help it come true.